Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations. Welcome back. I'm here in Austin, Texas with Grayson Murphy. Grayson, thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having me. Super excited.
For sure. It's a beautiful day here in Austin. We're here for TRE, and we're going to talk about running and life and stuff a little bit here.
Can't wait.
Cool. So who is Grayson Murphy?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Loaded question right from the start.
I guess she's multifaceted, jack of all trades, jackass of all trades.
Jackass of all trades.
Yeah, I guess I don't really put myself in one box, and I really try hard to make sure other people don't too. So that often puts me in a lot of new situations and new challenges, and I like that.
Cool. So I was having a conversation yesterday with Allie Kiefer, and we were talking about like the joy you have around running, and we were just talking about like how cool it is. And something you said right there was like exactly what we were saying. It's like you try not to put yourself in a box. And what Allie was saying is a lot of times, and she was speaking from her own experience, like a lot of times people try and put their own expectations or put their own measure of happiness or success onto other people and like put them in a box.
Right. So
one thing you've talked about recently is mixing it up and running roads and trails and doing short and long and everything in between. Where did that come from? Why did you want to do that? Let's dive into like you broke away from like a specific or similar trajectory that a lot of other people have followed, and you're doing your own thing, which is awesome. So, why?
Yeah, I guess I've never really been on a conventional running path. I didn't run in high school. I started running in college. I did steeplechase and longer events. Now I did steeplechase and 10K, and that's weird too. And
it's an interesting combo, yeah.
And I guess I just figured like, why start now following a conventional path? And I've always kind of done what I wanted to do, and usually that's not quite what other people want to do. Maybe I'm weird, but I like running on trails and I like running on roads. And I was like, why do I have to wait till I'm slow to get onto the trails? I want to do them now. And I don't see why I need to wait. So I was like, oh, just give it a go and see how it goes. And it was super fun. So I kept going with it. That was in July of this year. I started running on trails, and I guess I never looked back. And I just realized there's no reason you can't do both. And there's some great examples. Joe Gray, Andy Wacker, Sage Canaday, Magda. I know she kind of has more divided the two, but she's still been very successful in both. And so it's cool. And there's Jim Walmsley, great examples. Like you can be good at both simultaneously. So I was like, well, I'm going to do that because I like trails. So
why'd you go for your first trail run?
Like easy run.
The first time you went on a trail, why? What?
Well, I'm from Utah, so of course I have to go run on the trails because I'm surrounded by some of the prettiest wilderness and nature in the world, I think. I'm biased, but so I guess I just went because it was fun. And I've always done outdoor activities. We've always been camping and hiking, fishing, rock climbing, biking. So running on trails was just like a natural thing for me. And I figured, why not? Why can't I do this in a race? Or why can't I be this completely immersed and happy in a race? Like, why does it have to be always track and road stuff? And I realized it doesn't.
So would you consider it like a risk that you took, or do you think it was more like you wanted to do it, so you did it?
Yeah, I guess I knew I was going to do it kind of regardless.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, like, that's not the path they would have chosen for me. I know that it wasn't conventional. It wasn't like I was slow on the roads and then was like,
moved
I'll
over.
just go,
retire and onto the trails.
And it wasn't like I still think I have a promising future on the road, so I don't think I was like, oh, I'm never going to make it on the roads. So I guess I just, wanted to give it a go and see what it was.
So something you said to Eric Strands on his podcast resonated, and I forget what the actual quote was, but it was something along the lines of like, I want to do this for me and I want to do it for a long time. And I think that the longevity aspect of it is like, it's what it comes down to. It's like enjoying yourself and continuing to improve over the long haul. I love to hear that you're taking advice from David and Megan. They're the best at that.
Oh, so great.
And so I work with David as well. He's my coach, and we've taken sort of the same, a bit more divided roads in the spring, trails in the fall. It's kind of hard to run trails in Boston in the winter, but so I spent the last like 6 months trail training, and now I'm like super fired up to go back onto the roads. And at the end of May of this past year, I was super fired up to go onto the trails. Right. So I think it's like super cool that it's a way to stay engaged with both and stay excited about whatever is upcoming.
Yeah.
Another athlete that crosses over really well and does a lot of both is Devin Yanko. Okay. And so I talked with Devin. It was right before Way Too Cool this year, so that would have been in March. And at the time, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with like the next few weeks or months. And she was like, do whatever the fuck you want. Yeah. Like it's your life. Yeah. Nobody cares. And she's like, chase one thing until you don't want to, and then chase something else, and then chase something else. Yeah. And it's just like, huh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's cool to hear people of her caliber talking like that as well, and then people of your caliber doing it. So what are some of the do you have big goals on the road, on the trail? What are some of the things you're chasing at the moment?
Oh, I want to be relevant on both, and I fully intend to have kind of like a 50-50 season like you kind of have. So I think I really would like to get in a fast half marathon on the road. I think I've been doing 10 mile and 15K stuff the last year, and I feel pretty comfortable with it now. So I'm ready to kind of give a stab at a half marathon distance. It's kind of one of those PRs you just want to have, and they're cool. So looking at that for 2020. And then on the trails, everything's still pretty open right now. I want to go longer because I really enjoy the longer the better. Like I did a 4-hour race, the Bridger Ridge Run in August, and that was so much fun to me. So I want to do like a 50K just to see. That's more of a like exploratory situation.
Like a fast 50K or like a lot of elevation?
I don't really know. I'm kind of open to both.
Yeah.
I think fast would be fun, but I also do enjoy climbing, and I think I'm pretty good at that as well. So I'm just
you got a lot of races ahead, yeah.
And I have time to do like a variety of them. So yeah, and then definitely want to go back to World Mountain Champs and see what we can do there again. I need to go defend my title next year. So
you won that, which is awesome. So how are you picking races at this point?
Right now I haven't set anything in stone. I've been polling a lot of people, David being one of them. And
how did you get connected with them?
I guess just maybe Twitter and just seeing their work and reading his articles a lot. And,
have you read his book or their book?
No.
It's awesome.
So, yeah, and I worked with Megan. I did, she works with AxeGen, which is really cool. So I've met both of them and talked to them on the phone. So that was awesome.
I love seeing, I see David's replies to your posts. Like, you are awesome. You are awesome.
He's the most supportive person that I've never met.
Yeah.
He's so amazing.
You wait till you meet him in person.
Oh, I can't wait. And then, I guess, this roundabout, but sidetracking. I did know of them. I ran at Santa Clara for 2 years, and they were on Strava. And my teammates at Santa Clara, like, you have to follow this couple. They're so cool. Because we ran on the same trails a lot in the San Jose area. And so I followed them it's 6 years ago now. And I had following them, and I was a nobody. Like, I had never run a step till Santa Clara. So I started following them when Strava kind of became big. And then when I got to talk to them, I kind of fangirled for the first time because I thought they were these, and they still are, these amazing people, and they're so cool and good at what they do. So that was fun. But yeah, so polling lots of people, polling my family, friends, coaches, agent, anyone I can really get to answer me, I'll ask, like, what race suggestions do you have? And then I'll narrow it down maybe in a couple weeks.
Cool. Do you have a part of the country you like racing in the most?
The West. I guess I'm partial.
Yeah.
West Coast for the mountain stuff. The road stuff's kind of open, and I think for the mountain stuff this year, I'm looking to get overseas. That's a whole.
Oh, so you really want the climbing?
Yeah, that's a whole other level of competition too. So I've heard. So I want to give that a go and see how I fare in that.
Cool. One thing you said was you want to go longer, and you want to like see what it's like to go longer and where your head goes. What is it about longer than the marathon or longer than the half marathon or longer than 4 hours that excites you?
I think it's the idea of like, this is completely masochistic of me, but totally exhausting myself physically and mentally. That sounds
and
like
seeing what
fun.
happens.
Yeah.
Like where do you, yeah.
Yeah. And not in a way that is, I really don't like the feeling of like being lactic. So it's not exhausted in like the way.
Like not an 800. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone thinks of 800
right.
with lactic. But I want to see like mentally and physically like just completely out of energy. What that's like. It sounds like fun and something I would enjoy.
Is 4 hours the longest you run?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 3 hours and 41 minutes.
And what was the distance on that?
20 miles.
So I like going long for the same reason. It's like it's not for the discomfort, it's for what happens next. So I did rim to rim to rim in October, and I felt good for 38 miles. And I was like, okay, I can't feel good for the whole thing. Like that's not possible. So it's coming. And I took a video at mile 33 and I sent it to David. I was like, this is the highest I've ever felt, ever. I was like running on this like gradual downhill, running like 730s at like the 50K. And I was like, I'm going to pay for this and I can't wait. And 10 miles later, that was it.
Oh, no.
And it was so cool to like, and I was talking to my phone, like recording video because I was like, I want to remember this. And I was like, this is the worst I've ever felt in a run. And I have 7 miles of uphill climbing to go. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, this is what it's all about. It's like this moment, this is why we do it.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool feeling to get there and then persevere and get out of it. When do you think you'll get there? Or is that still something in terms of the longer stuff that you want to put off a little bit longer?
I guess, I mean, the 50K I've looked at doing as soon as next year. And same with like a road marathon, although I do think that needs to be more of a gradual build up because that's a little harder on my body, and training stuff I think will be a little bit more work to endure. So yeah, I've looked at 50Ks up to next year. I don't want to go much beyond that, because I do still want to run shorter stuff, and I do want more 10K PRs, and I can't make my range that big. So
10K to 100K? Yeah.
So I need to pace myself a little bit. But I do in the near future, next couple of years, looking to go pretty long.
Cool.
Yeah.
How long is long?
I don't know. I guess 100 miles seems like that'd be fun. But that's a ways off, a couple of years off.
So, the marathon or the half marathon, what are you thinking about at mile 10 or at mile 10?
Well, I've never done a marathon, so I can't speak to that. I've heard you're supposed to be feeling good at that point. But half marathon, I've only raced 2, and they were downhill and very low-key local races in Utah. So for me, like mile 10, I did them both also as tempos. So they both at mile 10 were like, okay, just gotta keep going. But I do think there inevitably is a point in any race where you're kind of like, oh no, will I make it? And you do have that kind of, I don't want to be doing this anymore. And I used to actually be sad when I would think that, or I kept track of like, oh, I didn't want to be racing. And now I kind of think like, oh, that's just part of it.
Yeah.
That's part of a race. So
I think if you don't get there, you should be going faster.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you have a favorite distance?
I don't think so. Not right now.
All of them?
Yeah, pretty much all of them. all of them are fun in their own ways and not fun in their own ways.
Yes. So you moved back to Utah from Flagstaff. What was it like living in Flagstaff in the environment that they have out there? And I'll sort of frame this in a different way. I've been in Boulder a lot. I have a lot of friends that live out in Boulder, and they talk about Boulder average as being like you have a shoe sponsor, and that's like you're good, like average at that point, or like you can run a sub 4 mile, like cool. Okay. So can 50 other people.
Yeah.
What is it like? What was it like living in a city like that where there's so much around? Like there are Olympians everywhere.
It was cool. I guess I don't know if I really had. I was on a team. You've like close contact with some very good elite runners. So that was really cool. And that's part of the reason I wanted to go there in the first place, was to have that kind of mentorship and learn from these people and see what I could get out of being around such talent and such big names. So it was cool. And I do think I learned a lot of valuable lessons that I now take with me. But at the same time, it was kind of like a bubble where that is kind of all Flagstaff is. And so if you're not running or you're hurt and you don't have anything else, it feels a little suffocating because you're kind of stuck on this running island.
Right.
So that also was like a downside, I guess, to being so concentrated with runners at such an intense level.
And is it different where you are in Utah?
Yeah, so in Salt Lake, much bigger city, obviously. And I'm living with my boyfriend who's not a runner, although he's an elite skier, but it's still different. My family's not runners. So I'm not in day-to-day contact with elite running, which for me is nice because I don't need that intensity to be good. Cool.
So you took a risk, moved back to Utah, and were you with your sponsor after you moved, or was that?
No, so the moving was, I walked out of that contract with Hoka. Yeah.
So what was that like going into sort of the unknown?
Yeah, it was scary because you hear about people are unsponsored and that's stressful, obviously, because you don't have a paycheck and you don't know if you're going to get paid ever. Right. And also I felt a little bit of guilt because I did have something that a lot of people would kill for and I chose to let it go. And so that was a little hard too. But in the end, I recognized like it wasn't great for me and maybe they can give this spot to someone else who will mean something to. And I needed to do it for my own well-being, mentally and physically. I needed to leave. So yeah, it's bittersweet, but scary too.
Yeah, I think the phrase pressure makes diamonds sort of applies there. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned your own mental clarity and mental conscience. Mm-hmm. Mental health is something you've talked a lot about on social media. Where did that come from?
I mean, I've always dealt with it, and it's always been a big part of my family, and a lot of us deal with it. So talking about it openly with my family members was always a thing I did. And once I had a platform on Instagram, I felt like that was not my duty, but some way like I could contribute to the greater good of like being the one to speak up. And maybe if I do, these other people can feel like they can too.
Do you get a good response when you talk about that?
Oh yeah, so many people, and it's crazy. So many people want to talk about it, but no one does. Right. So you just need that one person to be like a catalyst for that. So
I posted something a few weeks ago about like seeing a therapist, mm-hmm. and it was a photo from my therapist's office, and I don't know, like literally 60 people replied, like, I see a therapist too. And I don't have, 50,000 followers, and 50 people replied. And that's 50 people of, I don't know, 6,000 mm-hmm. that replied. Yeah. So how many are seeing a therapist that didn't reply?
Right.
That makes me think that like a lot of people are doing it, and a very small percentage of people are actually talking about it. Uh-huh. So it's cool that people with an audience like yours are talking about it, and I want to say like normalizing it.
Yeah.
We talk about physical health. You go to a doctor. I guess we're getting on a soapbox here. Like you go to a doctor to to diagnose physical health and make sure you're not getting sick physically, why not do the same thing mentally?
Right.
All right, then we can step off the soapbox. So is that something that you think about day to day, or does it sort of come up every so often?
Personally, yeah. I mean, I deal with it on a daily basis. I take medication for it. So it is always something kind of at the forefront of my life. And it doesn't just affect running. I think a lot of people, when I say I have anxiety, are like, you have race anxiety. I'm like, no, I have generalized anxiety. And that sometimes takes the form of race anxiety.
So what do you do?
For that, I've been learning it's really helpful. That was also part of the reason I left, was I realized I need to be in a space in my life where I'm happy coming into the race, and then I'll fare a lot better handling the race anxiety. Because I do think getting nervous is part of a race.
Right.
And you should be nervous.
I think nerves mean you care.
If you don't, maybe reconsider things. But if you're in a place where you're already on a level 10 coming into the race, and then you're already maxed out, you're just kind of in like a panic mode. So taking my life from like a 10 to a 5. And so then I can handle when I do have actual things that should rightfully make me anxious. So that's been helpful. And then I guess lately I've been just trying to really enjoy races and not talk them down to myself, but in a way I do. I remind myself that it's not a do or die situation. The worst that could happen is I get last or I drop out, and then usually what comes after that is nothing will happen.
Right.
Like no one's chopping my head off. So I'm like, okay, I can do this.
I think like a super freeing realization is that like at the end of the day, nobody cares. Like, and I mean that in the best way possible. And the perfect example is, I'll remember this moment forever because of like how painful it was at the time.
Oh, no.
So after we finish the Grand Canyon, we come out and it's cold and dark, and there's a bus that shows up, and we had been running for 13 hours and we get on the bus. It took forever to get on the bus, and I sit down and I open up a picky bar, and it's like this crinkly wrapper, and I start eating this picky bar, and I was like, oh man, I'm starving. This is going to be awesome. The bus driver turns around, looks at me and says, no eating on the bus. I was like, ma'am, I'm really hungry. I just ran 45 miles. I'd like to eat this picky bar. I'd like to eat this bar. And she was like, I don't care. No eating on the bus. And so it was like, in that moment, nobody cares.
Yeah.
And totally nobody, and in totality, nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's just running.
Mm-hmm.
And we assign so much pressure to this thing that is supposed to bring us joy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, like, if it makes you happy, that's success, in my opinion. And it's just really funny that like in that moment, like she couldn't care less.
You're not gonna eat it.
And I ate it. I was like, I'm gonna eat this quickly, and I really don't care. Speaking of I don't care. So I did a podcast earlier today with a guy named Patrick Reagan, and one of the questions I asked him was, I see all these people doing, they call them projects, and fastest known time, or I'm doing 6 marathons in under 2:30, and stuff like that. Do you just really love the racing? Are there these like projects that you want to do?
I think part of a realization that I came to this year is that I don't intrinsically enjoy racing other people.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's mostly about racing myself and beating myself. So that part never intrigues me, or the direct competition is never something I'm looking for. But I guess my project, maybe this isn't what you're looking for, but I like to think it's showing that I can do road and trail stuff and do them both well, and not just like average. Like I want to be elite in both. So that's kind of my project moving forward, is showing that, and showing that what I believe I can do is true. Because I think you can, and there have been examples of it. So I want to be another example of that. For
sure. And so you signed with Saucony recently. Was that with the intent of doing both, or are they expecting both?
Yeah, so I'm their hybrid athlete, and very much I'm kind of in the spotlight right now for the trail stuff, and they have some exciting new things coming up for 2020, so stay open.
Stay tuned.
But yeah, so I'm kind of with the trail side right now and just the end of the trail season, but they definitely know and support me in chasing road goals as well, and they're very happy to do both.
They're a
And
fairly accomplished road brand.
yeah, I think that was a draw actually when we were talking to other sponsors before Saucony. That was kind of a big selling point was I am a hybrid and I can do both. And if you're willing to let me, I can show you that you can do both.
You can do both.
Yeah, be an ambassador for both areas.
So what do those negotiations or conversations look like? Are you talking to a bunch of different brands?
Yeah, so in my case, we were talking to several, and my agent, Josh Cox, shout out to him. He's been my
He's pretty awesome.
Yeah, for the last 6 months, he's really kept me from going insane. But he's done a lot of work, and we were talking to many brands through the course of the 3 months that I was unsponsored, and yeah, lots of pitching and selling points, but I was very firm and made Josh make sure that everyone knew that I wanted to do both, and I didn't want one taken away, and I don't want to be kind of pigeonholed. And that actually ended up working in my favor to where he had a lot of interest from several brands, so that was really, really cool.
So what does that look like in terms of the obligations that you have for them?
There's nothing like no set number of races of each kind or whatever. I have a bonus structure that has both trail, mountain, and road stuff on it, so and track for that matter. So I'm really fortunate I can just kind of have the pick of the litter whenever I want, and I think as long as I keep showing up and representing the brand well, that's all they're kind of looking for.
That's awesome. And it sounds like they're looking to do more in trail. Is that true?
So, I'll be heading kind of their trail stuff this weekend at TRE, and they've got some exciting new trail products coming out, and then looking to move. So they sponsored U.S. Mountain Champs this year, and I think they're looking to sponsor more trail races in 2020 as well. So looking to jump on that trend. I think trail is kind of at the beginning of an explosion right now, and they're at the forefront.
Do you have any plans to do any crewing or pacing for longer ultras next year?
I've been asked, and there's several in Utah as well, so it'd make me really easy and convenient. So that would be fun, and I think that would be a good way for me to see an ultra before I do one, because I haven't seen one yet either. So maybe
really?
I should go to one first.
Oh, you're in for a treat.
Yeah.
So I've crewed and spectated 200s.
Oh wow.
And it's the coolest thing. I went to Western States 2 years ago, and to see the same runner like every 20 miles and to see these, like, I specifically remember Casey Lichtig and seeing her like super happy and bubbly and like absolutely on cloud nine, and then just like she fell off the cliff.
Oh, no.
And then she came back, and then she fell off the cliff, and then she came back. And to see somebody go through something like that is so cool. And like you get in the car and drive for 4 hours, and then you see them again. But something like that. And then I crewed at Run Rabbit in Colorado this past September, and there's nothing like an aid station of a 100-mile race.
Yeah.
People are just like sacrificing their weekend. I mean, they're not sleeping. They're staying awake all night. And it's just like, the line, like, if you are ever losing faith in humanity, go watch a marathon. No, the line is, if you're ever losing faith in humanity, go spectate a 100-miler. What are some of the ones that you've been asked to participate in?
So Speed Goat is in just above Salt Lake. So that's really easy for me to get to. And then the Wasatch 100-mile is also right there. So those would both be easy ones for me to get to. And yeah, I think that would be cool.
And so those are all higher elevation, right?
Yeah.
So what's it like living and training at altitude?
So I'm a bad person to ask. I was born in Salt Lake too. So for me, that's like all I've pretty much ever known. I've never really trained at sea level.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I know that going to higher altitude, I've never noticed any
like
differences.
8,000 or 9,000.
Yeah, and the crest trail where part of Speed Goat is in Wasatch 100, that's at 10,000 feet, and
that just feels fine.
Yeah, I don't know, but I've seen teammates kind of struggle with it, and I know it's kind of individual depending on who you are and where you've been and lots of things. So I know it can hurt a lot.
So how do you feel when you come to sea level?
I guess I feel pretty good. The first run back, though, or the first day at sea level, never feels good. It always feels pretty bad. And I've read that that's, there's debate that that's a physiological response. But yeah, I've never felt good the first day at sea level.
So I have a friend who came to the canyon with us, and she lives at like 8,000 feet. And so she came, I think we were in on Saturday. She came Monday. And we were in Flagstaff. Mm-hmm. Or she lives at 9,000 feet or something like that. Anyway, she was like, "Oh my God, there's so much oxygen here," and just like felt amazing. I was like, "We're at 7,000 feet. Like people consider this high altitude." Yeah. It was just really funny to see. A question I like to ask is, what scares you?
Oh, this is a fun question because I got very philosophical in college, and this is one of the questions I like to ask people. So my answer was, what scares me most in the world is myself, because I think I'm both like the keeper of my destiny, but also the one that could really be the one to mess that up. And I've seen myself hurt myself, and be
like self-sabotage.
Yeah, not in like that I'm trying to, but like with anxiety, I've seen that really like derail a lot of things, and it's uncontrollable. And that's the one thing in my life that I feel like I can't control, and work every day to try and rectify that or coexist with. So that's scary to me. It's like, I think myself could be the end of myself.
So what are some of the tactics you use to work on that?
The journaling.
Yeah.
Which, plug for my journals, but also genuinely I use it every day, and I think...
Wait, plug the journal. Yeah. What's the journal? What's the journal, I ask?
I make training logs and daily planners.
Now available for 2020.
$28 at racinggrayson.com. But they're available now. I started last year with the 2019 edition, and it was really successful. I had a really positive response, and that was born out of a need for me to have a training log and also my daily life planner in one place, because I felt like my life and my training is really intertwined, as is most people who really enjoy running. But also to emphasize that running wasn't my whole life, that other things are going on too. But the act of writing stuff down and having a moment to kind of go over and reflect on my runs for the day is really visceral to me, and it's been nice to write it down. It's kind of therapeutic. Yeah. And I wanted to share that with people. And then there's habit trackers and motivational quotes and stuff like that too, to kind of keep you on track and working towards goals even when things seem impossible or hard. So that has been one thing that I've used to kind of help with my anxiety. And then a therapist is very helpful, and medication, like I talked about earlier, I think is, if that's something you're comfortable with or you should be open to at least trying, it's been really helpful for me. And then I guess just talking and sharing with friends and family has been helpful too. And then telling me like, you're not dying. You don't need to worry about it. Like it's going to be okay.
Well, as David and Megan's book starts off, we actually are dying. And every day we're getting closer. Interesting segue.
Death is not imminent.
Death is not imminent is the point. Yeah, hopefully. So yeah, the journaling thing or the introspection is super useful. So through working with David, we use a training log through Google Sheet, and there's a training section, and then there's a life section. And I found that this year the life section is much larger than the training section. It's just like a dumping of everything I thought about in the day into it. So shout out to David for keeping me from imminent danger.
David and Megan. Yeah.
Let's talk about balance.
Okay.
How do you feel about balance?
I think that's one of the most important things to being successful, is having balance. And maybe short term you can be successful being unbalanced, but it's not sustainable.
Right.
I don't think you can put every ounce of energy you have into running. Maybe you run really fast in the marathon.
Yeah.
But then what do you have once the race is over?
Right.
And that's not a fun place to be. So once you realize that, I think you're going to be ultimately more successful in the long run.
Yeah, it's fascinating. A lot of coaches will say exactly that. Ben Rosario, who I'm sure you know very well, was the first guest on this podcast, and he that's one of the things he talked about. It was like, if running is your everything, I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
And I think that, so there are people who they work in running, and they do a lot of things in running. But I think the point is, it's not just your running, it's somebody else's running.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a coach, you have that going for you.
Yeah.
And so Patrick was talking about, like, sometimes when his running is not going so well, he pours more effort into his coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and he helps other runners
Right.
do better, but that's not his running. So it's sort of following the ups and downs along the way, and not putting all your eggs into one basket.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think, and that's probably why Ben, he was very helpful and understanding when I kind of asked him. I think I told him one day, I was like, I don't think I'm feeling very fulfilled with my life. And that was pretty early on in the spring. And he helped me try and work through that. And then eventually I was like, this is what I need to do. And he was very supportive about it and tried to help me with the transition as much as he could. And I think it is because he understands that ultimately is what is going to make you successful.
I think that type of situational awareness is incredible. Like, both on your part and on his part,
Yeah.
that, like, he wasn't trying to put a circle into a square or a square into a circle, and instead recognized that it wasn't a good fit, and helps you make that decision, or assisted that along the way, versus, you could see some coaches trying to push and trying to make it work. And then it's more effort on your part, more effort on their part. And in the end, what's the point? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I wrote a blog on this too, but I think the words I told him and a lot of my family, once I decided, I was like, I think I feel like I'm the wrong shaped puzzle piece for this whole. Like, it's not quite wrong. It's not all wrong. Some parts of it are right, but it's not all right either.
Right.
And I think I could find a better hole for me to fill.
I think that's like the biggest lesson I've acknowledged this year. And I think a lot of people go through life comfortable, or, like, not comfortable is not the right word, like, accepting of where they
resigned, I guess.
Resigned,
that's how
or
I felt.
yeah, exactly. And there's so much on the other side.
Yeah.
And whether it's in relationships, or in your career, or in whatever, in your career, I think that like, sometimes the grass is greener on the other side, and you should sometimes shake things up entirely and leave something that seems perfect if it's not perfect for you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, seemingly, if you looked only at results and press releases from this spring before I left, everything was perfect, with air quotes.
Perfect on paper.
Yeah, I had a 50-second PR in the 10K, a good result at Cherry Blossom, and I made my first USA team for NACAT cross country. So everything was perfect, I suppose, but not personally.
But whose definition of perfect?
Yeah. And I think I realized that when I ran the 10K and was really bummed. I just PR'd by 50 seconds. And lots of people were really excited for me. And I was like, that was awful. Like, I didn't enjoy any of that. And why am I doing this? Like, existential dread. Cue existential dread. So that was a big realization that doesn't have to be what other people think.
So where did it click, or where was that moment?
Probably the 10K was a big turning point of like, oh, I should be enjoying this. Because I was talking to my teammates and they were like, yeah, we love the races. And I was like, the races are the worst part for me.
Yeah.
I only do the races so that I can train. Because I have to in my contract. And I was like, wait a minute, like, that's not what it should be. And
now what is it like?
Now I go to races and I'm nervous, but I'm excited too. And I finish feeling excited, which is really awesome. And I'm excited to like accomplish and motivate and push myself. Where before it was kind of just going through the motions of it. And even though there was success, it was only kind of natural learning curve of just running another year and getting better naturally. So yeah, that was kind of weird.
Well, I think it's interesting because like that type of success is not sustainable, or the on paper success that you were seeing is not sustainable if you're not enjoying it. Like you can train hard for a year and like put yourself in a hole and PR, but like then what are you going to do the next year?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. So social media as an athlete, we talked a little bit about it. Do you find it challenging? Do you enjoy it? What's your relationship with social media?
I have mixed feelings sometimes. I like to think of it, and I try and use it as a platform for positive change, and it is really cool and interesting that I can use this to reach 50,000 people with a message, and it's a responsibility, a big one, that I am willing to take on. But at the same time, it is kind of hard because now I feel like a little more closed off than I used to be with it, in terms of like personal life, like dates with my boyfriend, or that's like not a place anymore for that. Like I don't put it on
because there's so many people.
Yeah. So I keep like family stuff, and those are my things. And I was telling my sister actually, in Hawaii, I kind of don't like taking pictures of myself anymore. In like Hawaii on these hikes and stuff. I'll take a picture of the hike because it's pretty, but I don't want to be in it because I'm in a lot of photos and I don't want to save myself. And sometimes I want those moments to be mine, to cherish, and not mine and 50,000 other people. So it's been a little weird kind of going through that. But that being said, I think I've been fortunate. I've had wonderful people on Instagram. 99.9% of them are so nice to me, and you guys are all awesome.
And hopefully all 50,000 listen to this episode.
Yeah.
We'd break lots of
records.
Love you all. I would call that an outrageous success. What are some of the challenges beyond, or in addition to sort of finding that personal balance with social media, specifically as a professional athlete?
Yeah, I guess you can't. There's some controversial topics you need to avoid. I would say politics, especially right now, and kind of a volatile political situation, is something that is not super okay to talk about unless you want to get in a bunch of fights.
And diet is another one that people are.
Food.
It's worse than
really
politics.
Hard. Yeah.
But that's one you talk about a lot.
Yeah. So I guess I've had personal experience with an eating disorder in high school, and so I feel like from that, I do have coming from a place where I can talk about it from more of an educated standpoint and I can try and see both sides, being both having had one and now where feel like I'm in control of that, see where some people are coming from. But it is hard because there's a lot of ignorance out there, and some people are like, well, why don't they just eat? And it's like, well,
it's not that easy.
Really how it works. And with women in particular, it's hard trying to convey to men how being a woman and all the other body image issues, stuff that we kind of go through with, like, you see, not even in running, in other advertising, like in fashion, and then how that is in our psyche moving into the running world, how that affects you, where men are like, why don't they just realize that it's not sustainable? So that's kind of weird, and I try and be very careful about what I say. Not to not offend anyone, but to make sure that I'm educated and for not looking at another perspective that might be equally as valid.
That makes sense. What do you wish you knew when you started running that you know now?
Oof. Well, so to be fair, caveat,
so I knew
absolutely nothing when I started running. Did not have a running watch. Had never seen a cross-country race before.
I love the story you told Eric about your first cross-country race. Let's hear that one.
Okay, so So this is 2015. So almost 5 years ago. 2014. Fall of 2014. We're on our way to San Francisco Golden Gate Park for my first ever cross country race in college. And I turn to the coach and I ask, how do cross country races work? Are there heats and lanes? What does it look like at the start line? And
it's a very long track.
Yeah, for a moment. And then he was like, oh my God.
Is she serious?
He just shook his head. And that's not at all what it was like. So that was pretty fun and eye-opening.
So you wish you knew what cross country was when you started?
Yeah. I knew that it looked not fun because the cross country team practiced when we did in high school and I was playing soccer at the same time. So I would see them running and I always thought to myself, thank God I'm not with them because that looks awful. I'm so glad that I'm over here on the soccer field. So yeah, totally different now. I like cross country.
Nice. So what do you wish you knew?
Oh yeah. What do I wish I knew? I guess that's a hard question.
Or what are some of the things you've learned recently?
Oh, recently? That it's okay to walk and race.
Yes.
That was new. Mountain racing often requires a lot of hiking and it's more efficient and you got to swallow your pride and just do it because you're a dummy if you don't. It'll go slow.
You'll walk eventually.
Yeah.
By choice or by
yeah.
not. Or...
So swallowing your pride and then also that people are going to say stuff and you might get good and people are still going to say stuff about you and you need to really tune them out.
And probably the better you get, the more people will say stuff about you.
And I have made the mistake of getting on message boards in the past and took me weeks to recover from.
Yeah.
So that was a lesson in learning, like, don't listen to what people have to say about you. I think a good quote someone told me or piece of advice was don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I might have to write that down and use that as like a quote for this this interview.
So whenever someone says something, I'm like, would I let them write my training? No.
So that's so good.
Say anything about me.
So Amelia Boone talked about this a lot, and something I think she said was, no matter what, 10% of people are not going to agree with you. And as your platform grows, that 10% is still 10%, but it's a bigger 10%.
Yeah.
So it just, if you wouldn't take training advice from them, that's it.
Yeah.
What do you wish your fans knew about you?
Oof. I guess maybe people don't realize I'm severely introverted, extremely introverted. So I think I come off pretty extroverted on social media, but in person, I like my alone time. I really like reading books, and I'm pretty soft-spoken in person as well. I'm pretty shy in big groups, so that's kind of, I think people don't realize that.
So at the TRE Expo, we'll see you right in the middle of the floor with everyone.
Yeah.
Have you been in there yet?
No, I haven't. I'm going to be in the corner.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, it's a lot of good people, but there are a lot of them.
Okay, preparing now.
No, all jokes aside. Where can we find you on social media and follow your fun adventers on roads and trails and tracks and potentially even cross-country courses?
Yeah. You can find me at Grayson _ on Instagram and Twitter. Although on Twitter, I don't tend to type much. But I'll retweet a lot of things. And I'll like your tweets if they're good. And my website, if you want to read what I've written, I have a lot of blogs up and learn more about me. That's racing-grayson.com.
Awesome. Well, Racing Grayson, thanks for chatting today, and have fun this week in Austin.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.